I came across this story, and I was struck by how it illustrates something we don't often talk about, the moral weight of care. Let me share it with you, because this is the kind of narrative that asks us to consider what ownership really means. This story begins with a cat appearing in someone's yard. Not a healthy, well-fed cat looking for adventure, but a skinny, skittish animal with a serious abscess on his rump, likely from a bite wound. The kind of injury that speaks to desperation, to survival on the margins. Our narrator doesn't hesitate. That same night, they take him to the vet. The vet estimates the cat is about 6 months old, still young, still forming, and unneutered, which tells us something about where he came from. Notice what happens next, because this is where the story reveals character. Our narrator doesn't just treat the cat and move on. They file a found cat report with local shelters. They post on Craigslist. They contact vet offices. They scan for a microchip. There isn't one. They do everything you're supposed to do when you find a lost animal. They honor the possibility that someone might be searching. No one responds. The abscess heals, but the cat is still limping. Further examination reveals his hind leg had been fractured at some point and healed poorly. Improperly. The kind of injury that doesn't happen overnight, the kind that suggests this cat had been surviving alone for some time before he appeared in that yard. Our narrator spends several $1,000s to repair the leg, and somewhere in that process of healing, the cat slips into the family, not through a deliberate decision, but through the quiet accumulation of care, of investment, of time spent together. 2.5 years pass. And then the narrative shifts, because someone contacts our narrator on social media, claiming to be the cat's original owner. They have pictures. The cat has distinctive markings, and the photos match. This person explains that they allowed the cat to free roam, and when he didn't come home one night, they assumed he'd been killed. Their daughter had been very upset by the loss. Now they want the cat back. Our narrator refuses. They explain their reasoning clearly. They've now had the cat longer than the original owner did. The original owner never searched, never provided identification, never microchipped. And after 2.5 years, after thousands of dollars in medical care, after the work of integration and healing, our narrator is deeply attached. More than that, they worry about what would happen if they returned him. The response is swift. The original owner and their friends call our narrator a giant asshole. They say our narrator has disappointed the daughter, that they've stolen the cat. Notice how the framing changes here. From a cat who was assumed dead and abandoned by circumstance, to a cat who was stolen, who belongs elsewhere. The daughter can't be that sad after 2 years, some observers argue. Others push back. Grief doesn't work on a timer. The loss of a pet can devastate people for years, even decades. One commenter knows people who still mourn cats taken from them 60 years ago. Our narrator acknowledges this. They remember and miss their own childhood cats, including a kitten who died from genetic heart problems at only a few months old. They understand that bonds form quickly with animals. That time doesn't dictate the depth of feeling. But then they add something crucial, something that reshapes our understanding of what care has meant for this particular cat. This isn't an easy animal. When our narrator first took him in, he had serious problems with bite inhibition. He's the type who accepts a few pets and then lashes out violently. He struggled with other cats. In their assessment, he behaves like a cat separated from his mother and littermates too young, who missed crucial socialization. It took enormous effort to help him. Training, patience, careful boundary setting. Even now, after all this time, they can only pet him for a few minutes before he's had enough. But now he tells them nicely when he's reached his limit, instead of attacking. It took nearly a full year to integrate him with the other cats, and our narrator still separates him when they leave the house. This is not a cat they would allow around a child. And in this revelation, we see the full shape of what our narrator has given. Not just money, not just time, but the specific kind of devoted attention required to help a damaged creature learn to trust again, to exist safely in a home. The kind of work that doesn't show up in photographs, that can't be summarized in a claim of ownership. Part of why they're so attached, they explain, is precisely because he was such a challenge, because he needed so much on so many levels, because the bond was earned through patient, careful effort. The original owner's story is that the cat was allowed to free roam, that when he didn't return, they assumed death and stopped looking. No microchip, no intensive search, no found pet reports filed in reverse. Our narrator's story is thousands of dollars in medical care, months of rehabilitation and training, 2.5 years of daily presence. A cat who arrived broken and has been painstakingly helped toward wholeness. The question the story asks us is this: what creates the right to keep an animal? Is it who had them first, or who cared for them most thoroughly? Is it the grief of loss, or the labor of healing? Some argue for supervised visitation with the daughter, a compromise that honors her attachment while recognizing the life the cat has now. Others point out that the cat is likely unrecognizable in temperament from the kitten who disappeared, that returning him could be dangerous, confusing, traumatic for an animal who's finally found stability. The original owner had this cat for roughly 6 months. 6 months of allowing him to roam unneutered, unidentified, vulnerable. 6 months that ended with the assumption of death and no search. Our narrator has had him for 2.5 years. 2.5 years of veterinary care, behavioral work, integration into a managed household. 2.5 years of learning his boundaries, his triggers, his capacity. The story doesn't tell us what happens next. It leaves us sitting with the tension between competing claims, competing values. But I think the craft of this narrative is in how it forces us to consider what we mean when we say something belongs to us. Legal ownership is one framework. Emotional attachment is another. But there's a third framework here, the framework of responsibility fulfilled, of damage repaired, of a creature made whole through sustained effort. Our narrator did everything right when they found this cat. They searched for an owner. They provided medical care. They didn't keep him casually. They kept him because no one came forward, and because by the time he was healthy enough to rehome, he was already theirs in every way that mattered. The original owner's claim rests on having had him first, on their daughter's grief, on photographs that prove initial connection. But it doesn't rest on a search conducted, on identification provided, on medical needs met. And that's the heart of the moral question. Does prior possession outweigh present care? Does the grief of losing something absolve us from the responsibility of looking for it? This is a story about a cat, yes, but it's also a story about what we owe the creatures we claim to love, about the difference between wanting something and being willing to do the work that wanting requires, about the gap between assumption and verification, between grief and action, between claiming ownership and earning the right to keep. The verdict from observers was clear. Our narrator is not the asshole. They did their due diligence. They provided care that transformed a suffering animal into a difficult but manageable companion. They have every right to refuse, but I imagine the daughter's sadness is real too. I imagine she thinks of that cat sometimes, wonders what happened, carries the weight of an unanswered question. The beauty of this narrative is how it refuses easy resolution, how it asks us to hold multiple truths at once. That grief is real, that care matters, that good intentions don't replace responsible action, that love for an animal must be measured not just in feeling, but in what we're willing to do to keep them safe. Stories like this remind us why we tell them in the first place, because they honor the complexity of being human and the weight of the choices we make for the creatures who depend on us. If this story made you think about what responsibility really means, hit that like button. Subscribe for more narratives that challenge us to consider the values we live by. And drop a comment. I want to know where you stand. Would you return the cat or keep him? There's no simple answer, and that's what makes it worth discussing. Title suggestions primary. She rescued a dying cat, then the real owner demanded him back after 2 years alt 1. I spent thousands saving a stray cat, then someone claimed he was theirs alt 2. The cat they assumed dead, and the person who refused to give him back alt 3. Who owns a rescued cat? The truth about this 2-year custody battle.